Good afternoon. My name is Jake McCabe, and I'm a pre-sales director with LogPoint. I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about LogPoint's next-gen SIEM and UEBA product. For those who are unaware, SIEM stands for Security Information and Event Management. And the primary goal of a SIEM is to collect information, security-related information from around an organization, and to aggregate and correlate that information for the purposes of providing early detection of security threats, as well as situational awareness to help organizations respond quickly to security threats. LogPoint's software is delivered as a virtual appliance, which can be installed on bare metal or on a hypervisor, including Hyper-V, VMware, as well as hypervisors in the cloud, such as AWS and Azure and Google Cloud. The LogPoint software consists of three components: the collector, storage, and analytics. These three components can be delivered on a single virtual appliance, or these functions can be broken out into separate virtual appliances in order to support scalability, availability, and distributed environments. As I mentioned, LogPoint's core SIEM consists of the three components: collection, storage, and analytics. The function of collection, obviously, is to collect security-related information. Collection can occur through a couple different methods. Probably the most common is through the collection of security logs, which are sent often by syslog, but also can be collected by agents deployed on endpoints. And then for other types of devices, LogPoint has fetchers, and fetchers essentially go out to those devices and can pull information, whether it be through an ODBC call on a database or through some file transport protocol by collecting file-based logs on a system. The next phase in the process of collection is normalization and classification. This consists of LogPoints translating these logs into information, so converting text-based logs into structured data, which can then be stored and accessed later. LogPoint also employs enrichment to add additional context to logs. So as an example, if a log is related to an IP address, oftentimes it's helpful to also record the DNS name of that IP address, as well as any information related to indicators of compromise that could be associated with that IP address. Another example, if a log is related to a username, it could be helpful to look up in an LDAP directory and append additional information about that user in the log. So enrichment really involves adding context to log information. Then routing allows LogPoint to place the log for storage in any one of a number of repositories. So LogPoint does allow for multiple repositories to be created. And the advantage of having multiple repositories for different types of logs means that you can actually treat different logs differently. As an example, if you have logs that are related to some type of compliance or audit activity, then perhaps you need to keep those logs for some predetermined amount of time. And so you can do so by setting a retention limit on that repository for those logs. Whereas other logs may have value for the short term, but don't necessarily need to be kept as long. So LogPoint allows you to discern where you store those logs based on the type of log or the contents of the log. This also helps you to manage the cost of your storage, so you can keep near-term logs on higher cost tier 1 storage, and then as they age out and the likelihood of them being needed to be accessed again decreases, you can then automatically rotate them onto lower cost storage. So LogPoint's analytics, basically what we're talking about here are things like dashboards and alerts, as well as ad hoc searches. All of these analytics are based on LogPoint's high performance indexing backend. So essentially LogPoint is, as LogPoint receives logs, it is indexing them, both the raw log as well as the normalized log, and allows for very high performance searching of those logs for the purposes of analytics. LogPoint also has two additional products which complement the SIEM. So LogPoint's Cloud UEBA adds machine learning algorithms on top of the rule-based approach, the rule-based algorithms that are employed within the SIEM. And the machine learning algorithms have the benefit of helping users of LogPoint to detect those activities which may be difficult to discern otherwise. So, for example, some types of threats can easily be determined whether whether activity is good or bad. Other types of activity, it's more of a gray area. So, behavioral approach, which the machine learning algorithms apply, helps one to determine whether something might be good or bad. And finally, LogPoint's director software allows for multiple log points to be managed in a cohesive, centralized manner. So this product is targeted at two types of customers generally. The first one being managed security services providers that need to manage multiple log points for their customers, but these log points, are our customer. They belong. The data belongs to the customer. So LogPoint, a managed service provider would need to administer those in such a manner whereby the customer has access to their own data, but the MSP has the ability to manage them. The second type of customer that this product is appropriate for is a large enterprise with perhaps subsidiaries or business units that want to maintain their own LogPoint, while the centralized corporation or organization can also maintain some control over them as well. So at this point, I'm going to switch into a demonstration of the LogPoint user interface. So the LogPoint user interface is a web-based user interface. It's based on HTML5, and it's the same interface that is used to both manage the product as well as to use the product from the perspective of an analyst. The user interface is divided into 5 sections. There's dashboard, search, report, incident, and settings. Right now, we are in the dashboard section. Dashboard allows for the user to maintain multiple dashboards, represented here by the different tabs across the top of the screen. And each dashboard consists of multiple widgets. Each widget is essentially a real-time LogPoint search and a method for presenting that data. So as you would imagine, a security analyst might be interested in seeing and understanding successful logins as well as failed logins. So this type of high-level information is placed at the fingertips of the analyst. Obviously helping them to do their job and also helping them to see trends and early indicators that there potentially could be an issue. LogPoint has, as a company, has gone to lengths in order to make it as easy as possible for our customers to be able to roll out and deploy and leverage dashboard content. So to that end, LogPoint has pre-built and curates a large collection of content, which is centered around various different types of security technologies, as well as different security frameworks. You can see here from these tabs that we've got a number of tabs that are related to other aspects of information security. We've got tabs that represents integrations with other security technology products. This one for Nessus shows us vulnerability information. This one called threat intelligence allows us to correlate the actual activity within environments against threat intelligence databases and threat intelligence lists of indicators of compromise. So here you can see that it's easy to overlay a list of known bad IPs and domains on top of firewall logs or proxy logs to help you to understand where active attacks may be coming from in your environment. If you want to add additional dashboards, LogPoint, as I mentioned, has pre-built and ships with a number of them out of the box. So typically typically when a user wants to build out their own custom dashboard, it generally involves looking through the collection of pre-built dashboards that LogPoint has created, and picking and choosing from that those widgets which are relevant and related to that person's role. So the dashboards are also interactive. So if you want to click on any element within that, you are presented with an option to drill in further to that information. So in this case, if we wanted to view the logs that are responsible for this attack data, we could simply click on it and we would be taken from the LogPoint dashboard. And now we're into the LogPoint search engine, or the search interface. So the LogPoint search interface is designed in such a way whereby a search string can be typed in this box, and that search can be run against any number of those repositories, and any time frame can be selected. So right now we're looking at the search results from that dashboard widget. We can see all of the logs that match that search, and now we're actually having a look into the logs themselves. Basically, the alternating rows of gray and white, each one represents a log entry. The bottom portion here is the raw log, and the top portion up here is the normalized log. So the normalized log, as you can see, is stored as a collection of key value pairs. And so essentially the key is the field name, and the value is the particular value for that log. And you'll notice that each of the values has a pull-down menu, which is context aware. So as an example, if you wanted to have the ability to do a whois lookup, or look up into a threat intelligence source for a particular IP or a particular user, you can define those drill down options, which are available to you based on the type of data. You can also type in, freehand searches. So if we wanted to do some searches of our firewall data, we could do that here as well. So looking at the last 6 hours of firewall data, once again, we have a similar interface. We also have this collection of interesting fields. So this helps us to understand and drill into this data without having to actually search through it by hand. As an example, if we were interested in finding Dropbox activity in your environment, you could actually type a query that says application equals Dropbox. And now that search has matched on 719 logs within this time period, which is the last 6 hours. And these are all of the logs that match that search. You'll notice that these logs have labels here. So these labels are essentially just metadata that LogPoint has appended to these log messages based on LogPoint's understanding of what the nature of a particular type of message is. You'll see allow in many of these. And so that will give you some sense for the type of messages. So obviously these are firewall messages. So with allow, you would presume that this is traffic that was allowed by the firewall. But then we've got one here that's actually denied. So if we wanted to further restrict our filter to just looking at allowed traffic, we could actually click on that allowed label, and you'll notice that it actually reframed our search string. So now we're looking at just Dropbox traffic that actually went through the firewall, not traffic that was blocked by the firewall. And if we wanted to get some understanding for, who was actually responsible for that traffic, we could actually click on the user field here, and we could see the various users that are represented by this traffic. So this helps you to understand, who is actually using Dropbox in this situation. If you actually wanted to build that information into a query that you could put on a dashboard, we could actually take this search, and we could pipe it to the chart function. We could chart the sum of the data size by user. And now we have a list of the users using Dropbox, and the sum of the data size, basically the sum number of bytes that was transmitted. We can also further refine this if we wanted to understand, rather than bytes, if we wanted to look at megabytes. We could divided by 1024 divided by 1024. And we could rename the field. And now we have a list by megabytes. We could sort it. And we could also limit it to just the top 3 values. And so now you see that we have a list of the top 3 users of Dropbox. We could actually take this this search, and we could put this on a dashboard if we wanted to, or we could actually make an alert rule out of this, and we could be alerted to the fact when someone is actually going to Dropbox. So shifting gears slightly, if we take a look at alerting within Dropbox, so alerting within LogPoint. So we are going to take a look at some of the alert rules that can be used within LogPoint. Once again, LogPoint actually has tried to make deploying LogPoint as simple as possible. So we have developed a lot of content around alerts, and so having LogPoint alert you on different types of use cases that you would want a SIEM to do is generally simply a matter of enabling content, or rather than having to build it from scratch. So you can see here that if I look in the vendor alert rules, we've got 21 pages of different alert types which can be deployed, and it really runs the gamut of generic things like scanning, as well as content that's specific to particular security technologies. If we look at my rules, so these are the rules that have been enabled on the system. So we can, as an example, we can look at detecting brute force attacks. And so if we take a look at this, I'm not going to get into too deeply into the structure of this query, but essentially this is simply a real-time query that LogPoint can perform. And essentially what the query does is it looks for 5 failed user login attempts, followed by a successful user login from the same user within 5 minutes. So essentially, you can see here that we're doing correlation within the search, and we're combining 2 separate search streams together, joining them on the user, and looking for one event followed by another. Each alert type allows you to specify a specific notification method. To do so, you would click on the bell, and this would allow you to specify whether you wanted to do an email notification, in which case you can specify not only the recipients and the subject matter of the email, but also the contents of the email, and it can include actual specific information related to the event. You can have LogPoint generate a syslog message, an SNMP trap. Inkman is actually an integration that we have with SOAR, a SOAR product called Inkman. We also have other integrations with other SOAR products, such as Demisto. An HTTP notification allows you to interact with a RESTful API. So you can specify a URL and have LogPoint make some RESTful API call, which could be used to potentially launch an automated response to that alert. And with SSH notification, again, this is really more than just notification. It's allowing you to actually log into a server and specify a script, a command or a script that can be run. So obviously, this is getting into more into the automated response rather than simply notifying you that an event has occurred. Alerts that fire, or alerts that are triggered, I should say, in addition to sending you a notification by whatever means you've selected, these alerts will also be logged in the incident portion of the user interface. This incident portion serves as a as a basic kind of rudimentary incident response workflow tool. So if you do not currently have some type of system for managing incidents, this can serve some basic purposes, allowing you to see and view all of the incidents that have occurred, allowing you to filter for based on criticality or type, and also allowing you to do basic case management activities as well, like apply comment, as well as to resolve and to close events. LogPoint also has a full-featured reporting engine, allowing you to create custom reports, as well as standard reports based on common templates. Once again, LogPoint has created and curated a large collection of pre-built out-of-the-box reports. Many of these reports corresponding to various technologies. Here we can see Office 365, a number of Office 365 reports, followed by some NIST reports and some GDPR reports as well. You'll notice we've got 7 pages of these, over 155 reports. Hopefully, if you do have to create reports for some type of compliance or audit activity, it's very likely that that a report has already been created for that, and then simply customizing it is all you would need to do. LogPoint's reports can be entirely customized. So right now, what we're looking at a LogPoint report, and obviously this has been branded with LogPoint graphics, but certainly you have the liberty to customize every aspect of this report. So from the watermark to the graphics, they can all be changed and customized. And the reports themselves consist of basically LogPoint searches for data, and then you specify in what format you would like to present that data. So here you can see we've got some graphical data, primarily graphical data in this report. Other reports have other types of data. We look in the SOX report. We can see tabular data and some charts. And once again, fully customizable. So the actual reporting templates, as I mentioned, we've got a number of them out of the box. If you actually wanted to customize them, you can clone them and open them up. And essentially what we're looking at now is the template for this Office 365 report. You can see that it's a series of LogPoint searches, as well as a means by which this data should be presented. If you wanted to add additional content to this report, we could go with we could pick select query. We would be prompted to select a search to add to this report. In this case, I will select my recent Dropbox search. We can pick a means by which we want to present this data. And this will be dependent on the type of report, whether it's aggregated data or tabular data. And we can specify a panel heading, select OK, OK again, and now we've added essentially a new content block to this report. This is by default at the bottom. We could change its position by moving it up as necessary. This report can then be scheduled to run on some type of periodic basis or at a particular time. Its output can be specified, whether it's PDF or even Windows documents in Excel format. So at this point, I want to switch gears again, and we will talk a little bit about LogPoint's UEBA product. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, LogPoint's UEBA is a add-on to the core SIEM, and it integrates machine learning techniques in order to help organizations detect difficult difficult use cases that are use cases that are difficult to detect by rule-based approaches. This is cloud-based UBA, so it actually runs in the cloud. And the way it works with LogPoint Core SIEM is that the Core SIEM will send key pieces of information to the cloud in a secure manner. That's that data is encrypted entirely during that time, and the LogPoint doesn't need to send full logs to the cloud. It only needs to send those pieces of data which are required by the machine learning algorithms to operate. And looking at this page here, we can see that of the 114 million events that have been analyzed, almost 2,600 anomalies have been detected, and of which, from that, we've determined that 3 entities have been deemed risky. Now, entities, again, consist of users, websites, servers, or shares. So these are all different entity types which can be modeled, whose behavior can be modeled. The way the UEBA is working is essentially we're building models for each of these entity types, and the model will basically model the typical behavior of those users and users, websites, servers, and shares, and it will use that model as a basis for determining when anomalies have occurred. When an anomaly has occurred, it will be scored for its potential severity, and a user will be assigned a risk score based on its association with and the severity of the anomalies that it is associated with. This timeline at the bottom shows the risk posture of an organization over time, and the color coding tells us what is contributing to that risk score. And this legend here, this essentially shows us what use cases the machine learning algorithms are looking for. So we're looking for things like lateral movement, data exfiltration, potential data staging, and bearing in mind that this is all activity which is difficult. It can be difficult to determine whether something is legitimate activity or potentially malicious activity. So, taking the behavioral-based approach allows LogPoint to help organizations make that determination whether something is good or bad. If we click the Explore tab, we can dig a little bit deeper into the information that's being presented. So now we're actually looking at the actual anomalies. We can see that right now we're looking at a time frame from February 7th to 8th. We can change that time frame. So if I can change it to all data. So now we're looking at all the data that we have within this system at this moment. And this timeline helps us to understand both what the risk level of the organization was over time, as well as the individual anomalies which occurred over time. So these gray squares at the bottom, these represent lower risk anomalies. As we go up the y-axis, we've got yellow and orange ones. These are obviously more severe, and the red ones at the top are the ones that have been determined to be the most critical. The panel on the lower left shows us the top risky users. We could also look at other entity types as well, servers, websites, shares. But for the sake of this demonstration, let's focus on users. And the panel to the lower right shows us the actual anomalies that LogPoint has detected. Looking back at the risky users here, so we notice that each of these users has a risk score. As I mentioned, a risk score is generated based on a user being associated with anomalies. So it's generated essentially by the number and the severity of those anomalies. So we can see here that Josh Newman has a risk score of 98. These risk scores will always be between 1 and 100. So having a risk score of 98, we know that this is definitely among the riskiest possible risk scores. If we wanted to understand what Joshua Newman actually did to deserve that score, we can click on him, and that will refocus the anomalies to just those anomalies that Josh was associated with. If we wanted to look at just the extreme ones, we can further focus it to look at just those extremely risky ones that Josh was associated with. Drilling into these anomalies themselves, we can see this first one, Josh worked in this hour, which was very unusual based on past activity. If we click on that anomaly, we have some more context. So we can see here that this graph is showing us the times that Joshua Newman typically works. And for this anomaly, Josh actually worked at this time. So we can see here that clearly when looking at the data from this perspective, this does appear to be anomalous. Josh always seems to work during afternoon hours, but here he is, working at somewhere before 9, and that is anomalous. I think this anomaly demonstrates how taking a behavioral approach is more effective than a rule-based approach. So if you were to try to model this using just the core SIEM, perhaps you would write a rule looking for activity outside of normal business hours, which begs the question, what are normal business hours? Are they 9 to 5? Are they 8 to 4? And I think the reality is in most organizations is that people work different business hours. So whether that be due to geographical nature of an organization or simply shift work. Or simply a flexible schedule where users can pick their own hours. So in order to try to model that with a rule-based approach, you would have to have multiple rules, and likely it would result in a lot of false positives as well as false negatives. So here, taking a behavioral approach is more effective because we can model this on a per-user basis. Now, that anomaly by itself may or may not be something you'd want to be alerted to. However, we can see here that Joshua Newman was also associated with other anomalies during that same time frame. So this other anomaly tells us that Joshua Newman sent 1.31 gigabytes in an hour using the post. And Josh typically doesn't send, typically he only sends about 820 kilobytes, and it wouldn't be expected that he would send more than 29 megabytes. So clearly we can see that the amount of data that he has sent is way more than he typically does, and certainly an anomaly. Again, whether or not this is something you want to be alerted to is debatable. However, due to the fact that Josh has been associated with multiple anomalies, it has the effect of raising Josh's score and increasing the likelihood that some of this activity could be malicious. Also want to point out that we're not only looking at Joshua's activity, so we're also looking at other users' activity as well. And so here, Joshua, this activity also exceeds, the expected amount of data that his peers would transmit. And so, once again, this helps to improve the accuracy of this type of alert, because not only are we looking at one individual's normal behavior, but we're also comparing that to that user's peers. So, obviously, it could be, a user may do something differently one time, but if they do something differently for themselves as well as different from what their peers are doing, then perhaps it's more likely that it is in fact something you want to bring your attention to. So once again, the occurrence of multiple anomalies associated with Josh within a certain time frame has the effect of raising Joshua's score. This risk score can now be used throughout LogPoint in the other type of alert rules to increase their accuracy and to reduce false positives as well as false negatives. So as an example, if we think back to the search I did earlier in the demo for the Dropbox traffic, perhaps you don't need to be alerted every time someone goes to Dropbox, but you would like to be alerted to if someone goes to Dropbox who has a high risk score, because that could be a sign that someone is actually exfiltrating data. So, once again, this UEBA is a very complementary product to the LogPoint Core SIEM. It helps you to discern between potentially good or bad activity, and it's based on behavioral approach leveraging machine learning algorithms. So at this point, this concludes the content that I had prepared to demonstrate. I'd be more than happy to open the floor up to any questions. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask them. And otherwise, thank you very much for taking the time to learn more about LogPoint. If you have any other questions beyond this, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Thank you very much.